What is up, guys, and welcome back to OWL by the Numbers, your one-stop spot for all things Fantasy Overwatch League. I am your host, Emily Drunk, and tonight on episode 35, we're going to be taking a closer look at daily Fantasy Overwatch League provided by FantasyOWL.com. Foul is here to clue us in on all of the changes that are coming to the platform with their 2.0 launch. But before we jump into the agenda for tonight and introduce you to the crew, let me just take a moment to thank everyone who has been waited patiently as these nerds kept talking Star Wars pre-show, as Ed just tries to get Ramses in trouble post-show. And of course, gotta thank all of our repeat listeners out there. So joining me tonight, as always, I have two of my co-hosts. Bob will be back next week. More on that episode later on tonight. So I am joined by the man who has been dropping it spicy here as of late. Of course, we got Big Head Ed. Ed, welcome.
Hello. Yes, I've been dropping it spicy. I've been dropping it left. I've been dropping it right. I've been dropping it hot. You know what? Because I'm bringing sexy back.
Is that what it is?
Yes, it is 100% that.
How long did you work on that before the show today?
Actually, none. But I got a story behind the scenes. I need to tell Ramses on this one. But yeah, no, Big Ed bringing the big sexy back.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've been pretty busy, as has Ramses, who has been feeding his brains out over in Open Division.
Okay.
How's that going for you?
So I felt so bad. We played. So I was there for our Saturday game, and I fed pretty badly. But
Did you take a point?
yeah, we took a couple points. It wasn't like we got beaten very soundly, but like we didn't get 100% stomped. We got like it was all right. We won Hanamura because their entire team forgot to come back to point, which was great. So
no, you won a point. You didn't win the whole thing because you got 3-0'd.
True. I'm sorry. We won 2 on that. Either way, we didn't win. We matched. Whatever. I'm rambling. It's doing all right. I have no aim today, so I lost a bunch of SR, but we're getting there. We'll bring it back.
I mean, will you? I don't think you can make any promises on that front.
It wasn't a promise. It was just a hope.
Well, tonight we
just
are
like your fantasy teams.
Basically.
Booyah!
Hashtag forever third.
I mean, now that Spider and forgive me, now that everybody's in the abyss, I guess I have to take the forever third label now.
Mm-hmm. Basically. That's
Pretty
just
much
how it works. Someone else has to pick up the ball on that front. But tonight we are joined by the man behind the daily fantasy provider, FantasyOWL.com. And, it's really the go-to spot for a lot of us for a lot of different reasons. So please welcome back a voice that you've probably heard on this show prior. That being Chris, a.k.a. Foul. Foul, it's always good to sit down and chat with your brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, guys. I'm really excited about this season. Always fun to be on the show and catching back up. I'm just excited to have you guys back on. It's part of my morning commute too, because it gets a deep dive into just it's nice to see an outsider perspective when I'm just kind of looking at a lot of the data and code on the backside. I just want to. It's nice to see. Okay, people are using this. It's worth the time to do it.
Absolutely. And what's awesome about going into this season is not only do we have multiple platforms, but we also have multiple podcasts covering the Fantasy Overwatch League as well, because we got, 2 of the veterans that have been, kind of at it from the get-go, and then we got 2 new entries as well. So we got 4 different podcasts that will be covering it on all fronts. So I'm very excited for basically the community as a whole just to have more content to consume, and, hopefully with everyone kind of taking a more mobile approach, we're going to have more people than playing before on the different platforms as well.
Definitely. Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
With that being said, of course, we've been spotlighting all of the platforms. I know for the most part, the season-long commitment was a bit much for some people. I know towards like the later end of the season, I know Bob was definitely more in like the daily fantasy Overwatch League side of things. But we were basically at it week after week, and it seems like that going into the season, there has been a demand for just new ways to play fantasy Overwatch League. And obviously, like, looking back, you were the first one to, bring forth an iteration of that daily format. And, we always talk about how, like, there's always been a demand for fantasy esports, much like traditional sports. And in the earlier days, we'd always heard from Nate Nasser, who was commissioner at the time, like, hey, like, we want to do Fantasy Overwatch League, but it's basically been radio silence from that point. Now, since then, it's basically been the community that has really been at the forefront to provide these different platforms, yourself being one of them. And we kind of started with like pick'ems, which led to standard drafts. Now we have, daily fantasy as well added on top of that. But I want to get your basically like what was driving you behind going towards the daily format over some of what was already being offered? Was it a means for you to try to say differentiate from what was already available in the scene, or was maybe daily your preferred way of actually playing like fantasy sports across the board here?
Well, it's definitely interesting, and the story is kind of funny how it came about. And I started working on this probably a little over, I guess, over a year ago. Probably started really focusing in around October, and I actually set out to do seasonal fantasy. And I was actually, even before I just found kind of the podcast, as I was messaging with Ed here and there, getting some feedback on what he thinks that would be good with fantasy Overwatch, and just trying to build something out. And then as it got closer to the season, I just felt like it wasn't in a place where we were going to like, it was almost kind of ready, but would have basically been at the start of the season. And I play a lot of seasonal fantasy sports, and I know how important that first draft day is. So we kind of took a step back and looked at everything, which was a little bit of a bummer because we were pretty close. We had drafting, we had transaction pages, trading, waiver wire, everything all set up. And I know there was struggles with that initially with some of the platforms, and they've since improved on it, which is awesome because I love the seasonal format. But I decided kind of just, let's take a look at the season in action and build something that really makes sense. And I think that's what kind of drove the daily side, was instead of trying to rush to a new season, and season 2 was kind of a new format. They were trying some new things, and see how it goes and see what we could do to do something that works well. And obviously there was very clear at the time inconsistencies with the API in the middle of the season. So that was, good time where I could just work on the actual site and the features that we needed for the site. Well, that kind of ironed out. And then towards the end, we're thinking, why don't we do this in a daily format? And it was actually because when we were starting to get stuff ready, it was coming around the time of one of the playoffs from the last stage. I believe it was in between stage 3 and 4. So we're like, let's just do daily. We have the data coming in for the play. No one else has anything for the playoffs right now. Let's see if we can get some matches playing. And we reached out to you guys and a couple other people to test out the kind of early alpha beta, and it was working, and it was fun. And then so as stage 4 started, we were like, all right, there was more I wanted to do, but let's do it. Let's let people play. And I think when we initially posted it just on the Reddit post, we got about 3,000 users jumping on, playing. I could probably be better at building the community in Discord. I'm going to try to do more of that and pay more attention to growing the Discord and the resources and I'm not going to be going on my way to write things, but I want to grow the strategy and the content that you guys are doing and have a platform to really share it. So really just kind of letting that grow and letting daily live in its own place. We want to make a good game that people are going to want to play. And when things were breaking, that can be really frustrating with seasonal. So I decided, everything we do with the platform is going to be geared toward making the daily experience better in some way.
Right on.
Gotcha. Well, and you had talked about like you reaching out to us, but I know we saw a lot of people actually buy into daily fantasy pretty quickly off the bat. Obviously, like we had a specific contest on one of the days of the week. I know High Noon did as well, but it seemed like people were pretty excited about it once launch actually happened. Could you give us any insight on how the user like interactivity, I guess, like the response you've gotten from the daily user base?
Yeah. So, what was exciting was one of the things that was important to me is one, I wanted to make contests that everyone can compete in and, have fun. And we played with the different formats. And there was, the traditional 1-versus-1 head-to-head format, the 50-50s that we called team fights, where we broke people up into groups of 6, and the top 6 would score, and then the tournaments, which we allowed featured for you guys. But what also was important was the ability to create leagues and to create contests and create daily. And the funny thing is, I'd see people create public ones on the site here and there, but the amount of private ones that were being created on a regular basis was actually mind-blowing. I think just through stage 4 and 5, I have a count of almost 1,800 leagues and contests were created.
Jeez.
And that, so people were
That's way more than I thought.
Yeah. And part of, obviously that's when you think of all the people matching up and doing head-to-head things, that makes sense. And I saw the experience point growing, and the gamification was something, I'm going to try, we're ironing out more direction on that. I was like, I want this feature in there. Let's see how people use it. And sure enough, people platinumed in like a week by entering millions of contests and stuff. So we're going to try to, we're looking at, I would like people's feedback. Thinking of kind of prestiging everyone that played, so they can kind of start over with a little bit more scaled and thought out experience growing points. So that's kind of one of the last things I'm playing with as we get close to the season. And I'm thinking maybe everyone that got to a certain level, they'll get a badge or something that represents where they were last season, because we were still kind of in beta the whole time last season, and people figured out exploits and stuff, so we're working to fix that as well.
So the important question then, I asked this over to the guys at High Noon GG. Does Edenar get a special level? Like, is there like a level where like the highest tier level?
Well, okay,
is
so
just labeled Edenar.
Let me just jump in here really quick, because I know for a fact Edenar did not actually hit the top level.
No,
so you're not getting it.
I didn't, but I did not game the system. And then I just beat you guys. I mean, like level 1 should be labeled Ramses. Like, all you have to do is sign up, and then you're in Ramses.
You can check
level.
with Foul. I had a disproportionate amount of third places in the entire.
You had a disproportional amount of shitty picks.
There is the award. Maybe I don't know if we can rename. What do we call it? But there is an award for being the highest scorer out of everyone on the whole platform on any given day. That's the hardest award to get. What do we call that one? I'm trying to remember. I don't know. The Mile High Club. Yeah.
Oh, I have that one.
Okay, there you go. So maybe we'll call it the Ed Club if you earn it a couple more times.
Just have the Edenar.
And it's just your. You want? Do you?
Yeah,
I know what you want.
My base.
I know what you want. You want your own owl. You want your own owl. Everyone else.
See, you get me. But 1,800. That's insane.
Yeah. Just through stage 4, 5, and playoffs. Yeah.
Now, did you see? I mean, I'm assuming you saw a decline when the playoffs started.
We did, and then we did a push right before the playoffs were fine, but there was actually a lot of activity on the playoffs. There was a little decline everything kind of spiked at the start of each stage. But then we had a really big push right around for the grand finals, and that generated. I'm trying to look. I have a breakdown of how many, but there was a couple featured contests, and that's when we introduced the power up feature, or the ability for one of your players to get double points, and the reason for that is because when you're looking at the grand finals, right, there's only a very limited player pool, so we had to add something to add one more element to diversify the lineup to prevent ties. And we actually, with the featured leagues, we actually got fortunate enough where I think there was a true unique top few lineups before some of the ties started happening because of that feature. And what you'll see those activated again for special cases with the schedule or special contests like grand finals and playoffs.
Yeah. So with the 3 different tournaments, the 1v1, the 50-person tournament,
Yep.
and like the tournaments like ours,
Yep.
which format did you see the most people play? Like, which one was the most popular?
The tournament. I think the tournaments were the most popular because one that was. I mean, from it. Probably by numbers standpoint, the 1v1s were the most popular because people would make a tournament lineup, and then it was very easy to enter into a 1v1 match because they would auto create, or you can make your own. But tournament lineups, I think that at the peak we saw a couple 700-person tournaments, and then they would kind of fluctuate between 3 and 100 depending on kind of the attention and the hype of the site, or the really we would see a spike again around the first couple homesteads. I remember the Atlanta one, we had a big spike of people coming to play just for that. And we're definitely going to keep the tournaments going and try to feature those even more, have new ways of really engaging in different type of tiers to expand that player type. So if people have suggestions or there's a certain mode they want to see that they maybe have seen with traditional fantasy sites, we're all ears. That's easy enough to set up, and I think it could be a lot of fun.
Budget leagues.
So I know you guys have been asked budget league. I don't
know if you want to say you guys. I think you can just point to Ed.
No, this is me and Totem. We did this.
I know.
Like every week we'd have a budget battle.
Never mind.
So I will. I've spent more time trying to make it work than I care to admit. The reason it gets complicated is because the formula that I kind of made to help price these players out is very determined based on all kind of 6 of those slots being representative of that total level cap of 100. So when it gets to do it with it's a little different than adding just the number, because it would kind of break some of the features that it was that I've kind of, especially in the off season, helped to build these salaries in, because last season I was almost manually adding every single one for every player every week. But I hear you, and I'm working on a solution.
So basically,
even if it's just for you guys.
Yeah. So basically, for now, the plan is we have to use the honor system.
The honor system,
which is what we have been doing.
Yes, but
which is why we can't involve Ramses, because we don't trust him.
Yeah, freaking wow, dude, get out of here.
Well, I mean, let's be real, Ed. There were a number of occasions where even in our budget league teams scored higher than the ones where we actually use all 100, all the contract points.
Yeah,
that actually is true.
Yeah, and that makes sense. When you think about it, when you're playing that way, you're picking players with high upside. So there's going to be a good chance, you're probably playing players that you might not have in your other lineups, but you're like, well, if this person does go off, they might go off, or they might get 0. It's boom bust. So, I think there's definitely legit strategy and learning that can be taken from that. And actually, I'd be interested to see some when that happens. Let me know. We'll post it. We'll share it so you guys can brag.
I know something I'd wanted to ask about. There was a couple times, granted, we were blessed that your platform was pretty consistent as far as like the points and everything goes. Obviously, a lot of the errors that Overwatch League stats have are caused by Overwatch League just never putting them up. But there were certain stuff that I was wondering about where, like Ed and I were talking about this before, where sometimes you'd try and pick up a player and they would be worth 0 points.
Yes. Go ahead.
So we would just be starting Persia every single week because we'd be worth 0 points. But I mean,
Izayaki was another one.
Yeah, I mean, there were basically be players that were at 0, and then I want to say you put like a minimum cost at one point. I don't remember if it was like 10, but I know like on the low end, like towards the later end of the season, the player costs were more around like 14-ish for like the budget players.
Mm-hmm. Well, So there was always supposed to be at the very minimum a player could be was 5, And the reasons for that is if all of a sudden it does come out that, okay, yeah, this player is playing who hasn't played a single map the entire season, but it tweets out, at least there's some, because it can be game breaking when someone's just a free spot. So, and then if someone played even a couple minutes, they'd bump up to like level 6 or 7, or like it was basically then kind of the formula goes into place. The instances where occasionally where someone was 0, there's a few reasons that it could have happened and will be prevented in the future. And one of them was league stuff with the API. When a player was traded or moved teams or was picked up, the API wouldn't get rid of them from the other team. So you might see, so actually there could be a 0 budget player but you'd have to check the team they were on, and they were actually going to get no points. That wasn't the case every time, but that was one thing where it kind of first started happening. We have to keep an eye on everyone, make sure there's no 0. Another reason is, like I said, there was a little bit of a manual process of adding all these people every single week, where I had different Excel sheets where I was matching up their points based on their salary from the previous week for their projected point totals that we put together from the algorithm, and then creating a document where I can upload them and have it back into the system. So it is possible someone might have fallen through the cracks there if that ever happened. But now there's a more of a system in place that make my life easier, and where that should be prevented. But then it is, that's just something we'll always have to be keeping an eye on. If the Overwatch API ever creates a new player ID for a player, is another way it would happen, where there's basically each player is assigned a number in the API, and they do something on their end where all of a sudden that player is assigned a new number and it keeps the old one. So that was kind of why you'd saw that occasionally.
Yeah, we do know like the API still isn't completely up to date. We do know that High Noon has been doing their alpha testing, and I kind of like went through the preference list to see, all right, like how up to date is it actually? And I would say there was probably about 20 instances where there was a player that was still listed on the API that is no longer in the Overwatch League, or were incorrectly labeled to be competing for one team when they move to a new home. So hopefully that will get patched in and fixed soon on Blizzard's end. But there's a ton of players this year. I mean, just looking at it, because we are working right now on our aggregate Fantasy Overwatch League like role rankings, and looking at the board, we have like 64 tank players, there's 62 at support, and there's close to like 75 damage dealers. So that is a lot of players to kind of just sort through and update on the API in itself.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, trying to get those pricings down for the first few players. It's there'll be some soft pricing the first couple of weeks until we get some data, but we're going to try to do the best with it, especially, and even looking at content that you guys are creating and anyone else, just to because look, I mean, I know D-Hulk, he's done a bunch of scouting on every single person as well.
Yeah, and we're gonna be wrong about 70% of the time on that.
Yeah, but that's even the case with football.
Yeah, exactly. Like who here had Gargoyle dominating stage 4?
Right.
No one? Okay. Like Gargoyle was like the insta buy after like week 1. And you're just gonna get that in week 1.
Mm-hmm. And it is noteworthy on the topic of the API. I mean, the API is a big, scary elephant in the room for all of us as developers. I will say, as of today, I can't really, I don't want to say anything too much to it yet, but I think some progress has been made. Contact with appropriate people has been established, and discussions are happening where very soon we'll know what the deal is, exactly what are you going to provide, so we can start planning accordingly and in pivot. That's the only reason that you don't see I might put some placeholders up for people to reserve spots in contests soon if we don't see something directly from the API. But that's why if you were to go on Fantasy Hour right now, you wouldn't see Overwatch League contests, because the match data just isn't, they haven't assigned a match ID to their to all the upcoming matches like they did last year.
As we wrap up talking about last season, you mentioned having to having to recode stuff just to make sure people didn't buy people for cheap or buy people for zero. Excuse me. Is there anything else that you really saw as like a big takeaway from your season 1 experience with the API and with running the platform?
I think the big takeaway is one is just the want and desire for the stats, to know what's going on in the league, and that was half the, and like I remember some people didn't realize right away that you could click on the player and actually have a nice clean report of everything they've done that season. And when people found that, they were pumped. They were just like, wait, this changes everything. This is all right there. So
that was me after, and then it got told to me after the first week. I'm like, no shit. Like,
yep. So so I've put a emphasis on and as long as obviously the API cooperates or whatever API we end up using, we are going to there's going to be a dedicated page for just all the players where you can see all of them on a clear view, what they got their last match, what they're projected for the upcoming matches, what their kills, deaths, and everything across the board, what their percentage was owned last week, or what the percentage owned during this current week is once the matches start. And those players and everything will move live based on the matches as they happen. So it's like kind of, to see how someone did, you now don't have to as long as everything works the way we want, you wouldn't have to have put that person in your lineup or go and check someone else's lineup to see their stats, which I know from a content creator perspective, that helps you guys a lot. And I'm also even looking at a way, I'm really happy with the way the view is coming together and what we're going to do with that page. So maybe if it can be exported into Excel so you guys can have it easier, but it's going to give a really clear picture in the league and how players are doing from a fantasy perspective purely based on the stats. So if anything, it can be a resource. If people don't even want to play, it's at least a place to see how all the stats are lining up.
Yeah, it'll be nice just looking at what the totals are week to week as we try to see, who we would consider to be, the best buy for what their cost is for that given week, which was something that you were basically just, manually sending us on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah.
So kind of, go through who would be, the bargain deals or the steals for that respective week, at least on the daily fantasy side of things. So let's go ahead and let's talk about the second iteration of this platform. Now, you've been pretty tight-lipped for the most part about, what all is coming. We do know that you have a couple of things in the works, which we'll get into here in just a second. But I want to kind of talk about, if we're going to see any sort of updates, at least to the current ways to play that we have. So this would be talking about, the 1v1s that are available, the tournaments, the 50-50s. Are we going to be seeing any format changes to those in particular?
So those are all going to be there still. But as I was saying before, as I think about all of, how the league's developing and how it's growing, and I think, the advantage that we kind of have at Daily is things can change at any time. We had it happen last year with roll lock, or, at least the positions and everything. So having that ability to pivot and be agile as the league evolves and grows up on its own is great. So that's why we wanted to make our focus, making every type of daily experience more fun, in kind of engaging that way. So as I had mentioned, originally we had worked on drafting and seasonal and stuff. I don't know if you've seen the schedule this year. It's literally like they just threw all the teams.
It's a shit show.
They put them in a bucket and just threw them on the ground and said, that's the order. But then I was proud of the work we did with the drafting, and so I was like, how do I make this work in a way hats off to the guys doing seasonal. I think it's very important and a lot of fun. It just at the end of the day, I was thinking, how can we make some type of seasonal format enjoyable? So what I settled on was introducing seasonal weekly or seasonal quarter seasonal, weekly, and daily drafts, aka best ball format, where you will be able to, at any given week or for a section of the season or for the whole season, and those sections will be determined based on matches and everything, you will be able to actually draft a team at any time like you were doing a seasonal draft. The difference is we've decided to pull back on the management side of it, where you would be setting a roster, doing trades, waiver wires. What you draft is your team for the season. You have your starters and your bench. And if you're not familiar with what a best ball format in fantasy is, it basically means that you're playing people within your league that do the draft, but you're basically getting the best points of their players each week. So the 2 best tanks, the 2 best DPS, the 2 best supports will automatically move into your lineup each week. So it's a different type of game. It's a different type of strategy. Some people are familiar with it, some not, but it allows you to, it takes away some of the headache that you would have from the seasonal league, where you might have players that aren't going to play until 3-4 weeks into the season, and it allows you kind of focus on the upside of drafting, getting that core people, and then also if an entire roster gets shaken up, in a couple of weeks, you're like, oh hey, I have that guy, and he's starting to move into my lineup, getting me points. So it's a more daily focused, passive type of game where you don't have to pay attention every single week to manage everything. It's really jumping into the draft, making the draft, and then beating the people within your league via leaderboard style. That's definitely the biggest one. It's a whole new dynamic. There's going to be a whole new section of the site for it. It's and that also kind of allows us to play with other esports in a seasonal way.
I have questions.
Yes.
Okay, so I get the idea of best ball. So just for clarification for everyone out there, when, let's say you're in a group of however many, because I imagine will everyone be available to everyone? So like if everyone wants Jonak, they can take Jonak, but it's a matter of whoever builds the best teams. You see all the players available.
No, so it is like you are joining a league that caps at 10, probably going to cap around 10, maybe 12, where you are still doing turn-based snake drafting. So if you grab Jonak when it was your turn, no one else can.
Okay, so you're doing a traditional draft. Mm-hmm. It's just how deep would your roster be?
Right now we're playing with the 6 starters and 8 bench spots.
Okay, so you're gonna be drafting 14 players.
If you're doing the seasonal chunk or a seasonal chunk, daily will only be drafting the starters.
Okay, so if you're doing sub-seasonal or season long, you're gonna do a draft just like you would like a normal season long, but you're not gonna be doing trades. You're not gonna be doing any of that. You have your 14 people. They're your ride or die homies.
Yep.
It basically slots in whoever the top scorers are for you for that week. So let's say you have someone that doesn't play at all, you're not going to get like a 0 for that position. You're going to have whoever had the highest or the second highest for that specific role netting you that amount of points rather than you just putting up a goose egg.
Yep. Okay. And then my other question regarding all this, no ad drops?
No ad drops. Just
no ad drops. Okay.
Yep, you just draft and that's it, and it allows you to jump in them whenever you want. And also obviously with this style as well, it's not it wouldn't be head to head. It's almost going to be rotisserie style. You're going to see your leaderboard every week. Each person's going to update and move up or down the leaderboard.
Man, Ramses, you're screwed.
So basically just be like a cumulative points at that point.
You basically have to be smart. Like I'm going to throw him under the bus because he's not on the podcast right now, but we podcast with a guy named Booger who had SBB as the number 7 DPS. He would draft him, and then he's screwed because SBB won't be playing. Or, stuff like that. If you draft wrong at the beginning, you're screwed.
But if that player starts playing down the road...
So draft all your Boston Uprising players now because they're going to get traded to other teams to play.
But if they trade, you get the benefit of that as well. And the Overwatch League season is comparably. I mean, it's similar length to other sports, but it is definitely long with the breaks and everything, and it allows it allows you to kind of have the fun of drafting and making new lineups, but then also the daily stuff's always going to be there too to play in that. But you can always that way at least there's a format where you can have a league with friends and even be in practice drafting too and everything. And it was kind of the logical step for us to where we had the drafting stuff, we had things set up for seasonal, but instead of dealing with all the management and features and obviously the risk that if there's certain things happening with the data, again, people aren't getting mad, and it's just something where we can kind of grow that aspect of it, where it's a more passive but fun daily game.
Yeah, and this definitely gets rid of the infuriating part of Overwatch League Fantasy, of my person's like, and Ramses, I will admit, you got burned by this. You stuck with it for too long, but you got burned by it in aim guy.
Mhm.
Like you get burned by my guy didn't start. I got 0 points. Now it's like my guy didn't start, but what did the other support players do, and so on and so forth. So it's a nice alternative to all of that.
You don't have to guess which Shangdu Hunter was playing each week.
I'm just gonna nickname this the hit it and quit it league. Like you hit it, you draft, and then you're just like, go to town. There's nothing else I can do. It's the hit it and quit it league.
And the other reason for it, and why I do think it's going to work well with Overwatch League, and it especially and really any esports format, is one with Overwatch League. There are players that aren't going to play for a few weeks, and then they disappear again for a few weeks, and then they're back for a month stretch, and then they disappear, and so you don't feel bad about drafting them, and you're not going to get burned if you invest a little too heavy in a team that isn't playing for 3 weeks. And so you can still go. So maybe you'll be in last the first couple of weeks, but then those next weeks you're going to see yourself bump up the rankings.
Can I make a request?
Yeah, we're still working hard on getting keepers. Okay.
So, like, if you're in a league with a group of guys, let's say we get like 6 or 8 of us.
Yeah.
You are allowed to have 1 or 2 keepers transfer over to the next season.
Okay. That's not a bad
Just like in fantasy football.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I like the idea of that, because then it's like, okay, do I draft Sparkle way earlier than I should because of the keeper potential? That's just something I don't know how realistic. I don't code. I don't even attempt to know how to code.
Yeah.
But I don't. So that would be an awesome feature, because you could set up like a league with a group of people like you do in a fantasy. If 2, 3, 4, 5 years with the same group of guys, and you have keepers and stuff like that. So that would be my only suggestion or request for this.
Where I could see it being fun, just talking out loud, and that I'll look at this a little bit too, is it's actually, if this would have worked better with this, and I had actually kind of made this when there was stages, but if you could keep someone from at certain breaks and then do another draft too, I think that could be kind of cool. You pick one player from your first draft, and midway through the season, the league gets to draft again, but they get to keep a certain player. Mm-hmm. That could be fun.
Now,
there's lots of ways to mess with this that are really cool.
And the reason we set it up that was because we don't once again, Overwatch League season next year could look totally different.
Because we're going to have a Chicago team that will be dominant above all else.
We can only hope. So, looking at the schedule, I 100% agree. Like, it is an absolute nightmare. There are certain stints where, say, the Outlaws don't play for 3 or 4 weeks, and they have the entire month off. Heck, they're only playing in February because of the fact that there's 29 days. Otherwise, they would have the entire month off at that point. So when we look back, there was always kind of like a set time in regards to when you could submit lineups for daily or really any platform. Is that going to change at all with how all over the clock the different start times are now that we are traveling globally with the league?
So it will still be based off. Generally, we used kind of the fixtures around the Pacific start times because it generally tries to keep everything. Even if there, I mean, even last year there was matches that sometimes wouldn't start till midnight and go into the next day. So really, it will be it'll basically still be designated by how the league says these are the Saturday matches, these are the Sunday matches, and there'll be a clear divide. And partially part of that is because usually some of the teams play twice and then not all the others. So it'll still be fragmented the same way. I'm not too worried. Worried about that. Really, the thing is, once it's always kind of been once your player plays the roster locks.
Right.
But if we're seeing something where we really think that it makes sense to swap a play, like I'm not even sure how if I've played with the need to be able to swap a player if they haven't played and I don't know how much that will come into play with the time, some of these time zones where if anyone's really going to be up swapping players at 2 a.m, but I guess they would. So if that's running into issues, we'll find ways to enable that. But generally, when the match starts, it'll tell you the fixture of this is all the games that are in it, and you get to pick the players from it. But you wouldn't see in the daily format, you wouldn't see especially. Like a fixture where one player would be playing twice. It just gets too messy. I've wanted to do kind of Saturday, Sunday matches, but the problem is the duplicate play each time kind of takes away from the fun of that. With football, they're not playing back-to-back days, but then that's where also we saw opportunity with the drafting side of it. You can have your player play twice in the best ball format and rack up those double points and not have an over advantage of anyone the next week because everyone drafted is going to play the same amount of times when that designated league ends. Still sorting through what those segments will be. And obviously, it works for the seasonal aspect, but that's how the segments will be determined to where it's always fair.
All right. So I know something else has been in the works as well, which is something that's been a big push for the platforms this off season, and that is pushing forward with an app release. Yes. I know you mentioned it in passing that you do have a time frame for this that you're hoping to get it out by. So can you tell us a little bit more about what exactly you would have planned for daily fantasy on your phone?
Yeah. So I was really, really, really hoping I could say it's out right now on the podcast.
You're just going to be like Oprah. And you get an app. And you get an app.
You can get it right now. But
in a brand new car.
But it's going to take a couple more days. But it's very close. It's when we built the site, if you ever got to if people did log into it on their phones, it worked okay. Where I always had that in mind, wanting to make it not a nightmare on mobile. Right. There was things that could have been improved, and there was little things. I know some Android users had scrolling issues on certain player pages, and surprisingly, the iPhone worked decently. But to do this drafting format, I realize an app is important, especially with notifications, because you want to know when it's your turn. Leagues will fill as they do. There'll be different parameters on the speed of the draft. There'll be fast ones that are 30 seconds, so you can make a pre-draft list before, and then there'll be long ones too, where you can kind of pick and choose a long format, so you don't have to exactly be at your computer right when it happens. So the app itself, we're pushing with the development, and I think we will be in a place where it will be available both on the iTunes and Android store. I'm hoping for early next week or by the end of week. We just have a little bit more testing to do, but at the very least, we're going to get the functionality that it had when you log in on your phone on the App Store, and then continue to clean that up throughout the season until we go fully native with the app.
Sweet. I wanted to ask along with that, is there going to be any sort of, like, I know one of the things I really liked with Fantasy OWL last year was like the different gamification aspects, like with all the different team specific owls and everything. With the mobile app, is there anything else on that sort of side that we can expect, or are things going to kind of be the same?
It'll all work the same on there. You'll be able to see the achievements. I do want to grow kind of the achievements and the challenges and do more with the coin abilities and stuff. And I mean, it's if you're smart, the coins are really a placeholder for money. We want to, people, and it's a way so we wanted to have a more competitive level where people want to, at least be able to acquire those. So the plan is to always keep those in the game, but as if everything's running smooth, then to start develop some ways so at least those coins can be used in fun ways, with whether it be avatars or other types of ways to decorate your page or achievement, or just kind of be unique. Yes. So
you can get the forehead avatar.
Yeah. But as far as it, everything will work exactly the same on the app, and then we'll. Basically, I want to make sure the game itself through Overwatch is working nice and smooth, and then we're gonna keep adding the toppings back on.
Of course, sweet.
Well, I know I don't have any other follow-ups. I don't know about either of these two, but I will say, Daily Fantasy OWL really captured all of us on the show. And I know, the community as a whole really embraced it, knowing that you didn't have to commit for the entirety of a season, and just the concept of best ball is something I could really see taking off across the board here.
100%.
Knowing that, we're not always going to constantly be checking, the different social medias over on Twitter to see whether or not one of our players is starting. We don't have to worry whether or not Aim God is getting in a fight with his other main support on his team or anything like that. So
I mean, if he gets in a fight with Ark out of everybody, like Ark, then I think
that's like coming out and being like, who I hate the most in Overwatch? Mickey and Bishu. Like, screw those guys. They're just horrible people.
Yeah. And I'll say too, I mean, the best ball, it is it is it's very restructured from when we're building a pretty in-depth seasonal side of the platform. So it's going to be a fun side of the platform to engage with. You'll be able to easily see everyone's lineups, what their scores are, who's on their bench. You'll be able to see the order and that everyone draft and chat kind of within your individual leagues, and just have that thing where you're in a league with a group of people that you want to talk trash to, instead of potentially 100 200 people in a tournament. We'll still experiment with ways to do big ones like that, but the idea now is, or at least with these best balls too, no one's gonna have the same lineup as you either. It's really gonna be who drafted best, who knew who to get, and who knew was the upside players.
I do have a couple more questions about the best ball situation. Is there a minimum amount of teams?
So right now, the max I'm playing. Now that lineups are officially fit, it'll flirt between 10 and 12. If we think 12's the answer, the issue is the amount of players in the league, and making sure around 10 you end up. If you do 14 rounds with 10, I think you end up with like 15, 20 people that don't get drafted. So we could probably squeeze 12 in. We're going to play with that. We want to make sure it works. I haven't done the
12 would be a bit much. Just because 10, you're at that point, you're drafting backups.
Right. and so 10 was kind of the sweet number there, but you can do 2, you can do 4, you know, it's all the way
You can
up.
do okay.
Yeah, all the way.
I was just gonna say, now, what about people who are not in the API? Like, I'm thinking specifically people like Sparkle, or someone like that who won't be in the API because they can't play for half the season. Will we be adding some of these like underage players to the draft eligible field, or are they just shit out of luck?
That will, and that is a really good point. And it's kind of, I have a pretty well brought up backup plan if the Overwatch League API is not being nice to us and not doing everything we need. You know, there's other people out there that are working hard on these stats. Some have gotten further than others, but you know, the last thing we want is there to not be any type of fantasy Overwatch, and so that these are all. That's actually one I'm going to bring up directly with, you know, without giving away too much, we can talk about. There's a lead on who the hell is actually in charge of this thing, and they're willing to. So that's yeah.
Okay. I just want to confirm because Hulky, whatever. Asked in chat, he just any real money this year. I know there's not any real money or anything like that right now, but do you have any plans? Because I know you're in the vicinity of New Jersey. And if it's based out of there,
so
just saying,
PO
boxes exist.
This year there will be for sure real money with Counter-Strike and League of Legends. Overwatch, I really need to trust the data before I would commit to that.
That's the big thing.
We would not offer it for Overwatch unless we, you know, really knew or had a disaster recovery type thing, which we've actually thought about. You know, if we wanted to experiment with it, and there was some break where we know we could verify all the data wasn't in there, no one would have lost anything. But yes, there is about half the states in the country for now where we are looking very soon to offer some type of paid contests rollout to users for those 2 other esports because they have very, very reliable APIs.
Weird how that works out.
So,
if you want to make any money, Ed, I guess we're going to CSGO.
Yeah.
Or I'll just, no.
Yeah.
I can't bet in Wisconsin.
Not even.
But Totem lives in Illinois. Totem just gonna like PayPal you some money and tell you who to pick. I mean, I'm not going to break any laws.
No, you can't do that.
I'm not going to wire money across state borders to illegally gamble for me. What the hell are you talking about? Screw all of you.
There will be detailed VPN checks with anyone that actually are doing deposits and withdrawals, and we'll stick to these standards and regulations in the 21 states that we were approved to do it in.
Stop being the response. God.
I don't want someone digging this up.
like the Vegas Gaming Commission is like, I heard you on this nonchalant podcast talking about how you can scheme the system. Like, gotcha.
No.
So, all right, I'm very excited about. Like that is one thing I didn't think of a best ball situation. I thought of more of doing drafting a team's DPS line or like drafting this team's tank line, and that had no appeal to me.
Yeah,
to take care of, because unlike any other sport, any other fantasy sport, you had to deal with more of the players not playing and not knowing they're not playing. in Overwatch than anything else. So you found a nice alternative to this.
Yeah,
And it helps the people who prepare more.
right. We wanted to just add a new level of strategy and fun game mode where the people that enjoy seasonal can also, get the fun of seasonal games at any time and, still want to engage with it because we find that I think a lot of these users too will be playing the daily games on a regular basis. So it's a nice, easy hop over. Hey, how's my drafted team doing and stuff, and have that kind of league feel. And I agree with you 100% on what you're saying about the team drafting and the whole thing that's drawn me to fantasy esports as an entertainment, as a medium, is the passion for the players. People pick the teams they follow based on the player first in esports. That's not really the case in other sports. You see that a lot with esports and they'll follow that player. They saw him on Twitch. They like that person. They can name all the players across the team better than it's just someone that's a fan of, their one sports team from their region. Yeah, you'll have alignment for where, your area is, but really esports is a showcase of the talents of these individuals. And that's why I just think fantasy is a perfect marriage between that.
I just want to praise you for what you said because I get so much shit from these guys and all the other content creators of like, I am not a fan of any specific team. I'm a fan of players.
Yep.
And that's what I follow because I don't have a team. I don't. Right now, I actually like the Houston Outlaws because I like the players on their team.
Or Steffi.
Nah.
The issue has always been that you put yourself up on the castle. We're like, well, no, I don't have a team. You can't make fun of my team.
I don't have a team. I do not have a team.
Sucks. Your team sucks. I don't have a team. You can't.
I don't. Until we have a Chicago team, I don't have a team. I cheer for who I want. My favorite player in Overwatch, Totem. Can you tell who it is?
Are we talking Overwatch or Overwatch League? Because those are two
Overwatch
different...
League.
Right
is
now?
Is it Amin?
Yeah.
Oof.
He's a tank.
Is
Come on.
Fisher?
We've talked about this it's Fissure.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I loved Fissure, so I liked the Gladiators when Fissure was on them. I liked Soul when Fissure was on them. I bought jerseys for them. I'm going to be buying Titans Fissure jersey when it becomes available, which is so stupid that it's not available, and the league starts in like 2.5 weeks, but let's not get started with that. But like, yeah, it's one of those things where I follow the players, not the teams. And that's why fantasy is amazing.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully, as esports grow and, we want to grow platforms, that's why we're looking at other esports too. But, a lot, we dove into because Overwatch was the first to embrace a true sports format. We're starting to see the trend now with other ones. Call of Duty is trying to do more of a league format. And I think, we're gonna see this trend where there's going to be home and away. There's going to be regional support. It's just the natural progression of it. So fantasy, I'm hoping, I'm hoping Overwatch continues to follow traditional sports formats and kind of figures out a true schedule that makes sense. I think they're going to run into their hiccups this year, but they're experimenting. And that's the one thing that when I, had to make the business decision, because I really wanted to do seasonal, but at one point it just had to be what is worth putting the most time in for us that we can make the best experience and not, two okay experiences because it's a lot to manage. That's why I like focusing on daily because it can grow with the league. If something crazy happens in a couple months, it can, even if it's a couple weeks of downtime, we can adjust to that and fix it and make a new format that works for whatever screwball they threw it at our face, whether whatever it could be. And I think that goes in part is I like that challenge. I like finding and building the ability to create new tournaments, new game types that people can jump into at any time, because there's going to be people that there's going to be just esports is so new that there's going to be fans of the Overwatch League that were not fans this month right now. Mm-hmm. They might grow, especially with these home and away games. Someone that might not be a fan until someone drags them out to an event in their home city and they're like, oh, and now they start following everything, and now they can jump right in and start playing fantasy. So that's kind of where the focus is, and we're just going to keep making these types of game modes and grow them and really make it fun. It will use, there's lots of suggestions coming in, whether it be daily leagues that carry throughout the season so you guys can still compete against each other. We're listening to all of that. Any suggestions at all people have, please jump on the Discord, message me. I think the reason it sounds like I've been quiet lately is the amount of, I need to get better at sharing things with the community. But if you looked at my DMs on Discord, it's just lines and lines of people I'm talking to about all the things and ideas we're working on. I want to make that more public. And if there's anyone that wants to be involved, likes the site, wants to help it grow, whether it be creating content or just share, I'm looking for people to bounce ideas off of all the time. I'm looking for people that want to get involved in the esports scenes. I'm a very event oriented person, so I talk to a lot of the people hosting these events and these watch parties. We're looking at tie-ins for them. So if people are in the States and they want to represent at them, we'll help set that up for you. Really just doing a push this year to let people know what we're doing, and also give people an avenue into the industry that are passionate about this. So feel free to message me, Twitter, Discord. I'm all ears. Do not hesitate. This is a spot for anyone, because this is just this is a passion project for me, and and I appreciate everyone that plays it.
Absolutely. Looks like Doki's saying, just imagine a daily fantasy contest only for people that are at the venues live for the games for the home stands. I think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, we could do that with a code, just a code or a league code. Yeah, that could already be set up.
Well, they're already showing that homestand specific drops or items are going to be available this season too.
Yeah, team sprays, which you get through a code, which you will just add to your Battle.net account like you would with any other digital goods.
So you mean stuff that will be up on eBay?
Yes, essentially.
All right. 50% actually used, 50% on eBay, overpriced. Gotcha.
And we're going to bring back some cool prizes too. And if anyone has recommendations, or if anyone knows how to I would love to get some involvement with digital content, digital prizes that are reflected either with Twitch and stuff. People know how to do that. There's only so much I can focus on, but I'm all ears. Let's really add to the gamification if we can, especially if I'm going to feel bad if people are winning money on League of Legends and Counter-Strike, and we just can't do it with Overwatch. So I want to have as much opportunities for people to win cool things and be encouraged to play each week.
Awesome.
All right. So I think that's pretty much going to wrap it up, unless anyone in chat has any questions for you. But I know all of us here are greatly looking forward to, the season starting, of course. We're probably going to have multiple leagues across all platforms. And I'm sure we're going to have a lot, both daily format as well as the new offerings on fantasyowl.com. And hopefully we'll see more people rocking the owls pretty soon.
Yeah. I'll have to do another draft of new owls for people. I was hoping we'd get some new teams to make some new ones, but we'll get some more emote based ones for sure. And then I see a nice bearded bald owl.
Yeah, the bearded bald owl, and it shall forever be known as the Ed.
Yep.
Well, there you go.
And then Ramses, and here we go. So you can make one with a Canadian tuxedo if you're in a 50-person league and you come in dead last. You get the
I think that should be
the Canadian tuxedo emote.
Nah, I think that should only be if you get third.
No, it's last.
Yeah.
See, that's Mental actually has a good point in chat. We could set up celebrity leagues.
Yeah. I mean, the casters noticed. A couple people pointed out they were talking about it. I know.
Yeah, because Bren was pissed.
Yeah, why is my point so low?
Because he had drafted SBB and he was benched.
Yeah, and we got lucky that Zoe's team kicked ass, and she retweeted her lineups, and I was like, where did we just get 500 new subscribers?
So definitely right out of the gate, we should plan on doing that again if they do start to like draft teams for like one of the
Yeah.
watch point segments again. Whether or not that will actually be the case remains to be seen, but hopefully we'll see more on that front once we have some of the studio updates.
Yes,
Which will
and it'll
hopefully
be
be
possible.
anytime now. You know?
Yeah. Who's
Any day now.
actually? Yeah, who's gonna be? Who do I need to tweet fan made lineups at?
All right, so with that, I think it is time that we wrap things up for tonight. So if you guys want to help us out, as always, the best thing to do for really any podcast out there is head over to iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Write us a review, let us know how we're doing. Of course, as we mentioned, this is currently the off season, so to speak. So once the Overwatch League comes back on the air, expect the format to change back to what it was prior. We'll let you know who to be starting, who to sit. We'll obviously go into draft strats here fairly soon once all of that is up and running across the platforms. And we just hope to hear from you guys, so let us know how we're doing on that front. And if you're looking for additional Overwatch-related content, we, of course, have our podcast directory, which features a number of different shows offering content for you to consume. And then every Sunday, we do the Weekly Recall, which has a listing of all the prior week's episodes released across the Overwatch scene. So to find the latest on that, find Overwatch Recall on Twitter at OWRecall. Now, of course, Ramses, there are different ways how our listeners can support not only this podcast, but the other offerings that we do have on our network. So why don't you go ahead and let them know how they can do that?
For sure. If you'd like to show some additional support to the network of all the different shows we have here, and you can make Ed dance just for a little bit more, we highly encourage you to consider pledging to the network Patreon. Tiers start at just $1 a month, and you can find all the info you need at patreon.com/owlnetwork. And you too can join the likes of our master and above patrons like Blazing Bob, Brendan, Josabel, Owl, Kesha, and Agent Life, and just helping the network grow and do bigger and better things. And then another announcement to talk about: this Saturday, actually on the 25th, we'll see the highly anticipated return of Owl Network Game Night. So again, this Saturday, January 25th, and we'll be doing a whole night of custom and workshop games starting at 7 p.m. Pacific time. And it'll be your one chance to be able to headshot Ed.
I've had plenty of opportunities in our queue.
I won't be there. And God knows I wasn't going to do it even if I was there anyway. So now's your chance to kill Ed for me, please.
Whatever.
And then we'll be hanging out in the game night lobby prior to actually starting the game. So if you want to hang out for some quick play, do some other stuff, feel free. We'll be right there. And everything will be streamed on our Twitch channel at twitch.tv/owlnshow.
Okay. So, the most anticipated part of the show.
Where we end the show.
No. Where we get to Ed's random fact/question.
You can email the show at contact
Shut up.
owlnshow.
You shut your dirty pie whore mouth. Okay, so in Jurassic Park, what, and Totem, I feel you know this.
Okay.
What is the sound, the actual sound of the Velociraptor sound? Like, what did they do to make the Velociraptor sound?
Is it like what they did with Godzilla, where they have like the metal glove like going down like a ribbed pipe?
It is not a metal glove.
I swear I don't know if this is true.
You've all heard this before.
I'm gonna be really embarrassed if it's wrong. Is it the sound of turtles having sex?
It is the sound of turtles having sex. That is the sound of the Velociraptors.
Thank God that's the right answer.
Otherwise, we're going to be like, what are you watching on Pornhub? Yeah. When we went over our list of stuff on Pornhub, turtles having sex was not one of the options. So there's your random fact/question of the day. The more you know.
This has been Raunchy Turtle Bits with Foul and no WL by the numbers.
Like turtle porn. Yeah. All right. So you can reach the show at contact@owllandshow.com. We are on Twitter, and that's at OWL by the numbers. We do have a website, and that's owllandshow.com. We are on YouTube, youtube.com/Overwatch League Network. We are on Discord, so make sure to come over there, join us, especially if you're going to do game night. And that's at discord.me/OWLnshow. We are streaming on Twitch at twitch.tv/OWLnshow. We are a Twitch affiliate to help support the show by subscribing to our channel and earn our network emoticon. We do podcast and stream pretty regularly. So Overwatch League Network airs Mondays at 7 p.m. Pacific. This show, OWL by the numbers, airs Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific. Next week, we will actually be joined by KG and Dylan over from Draft Buff, the new fantasy site coming into this year. Well, fantasy app, not site. They don't.
I mean, they
We'll
have
go
a
over
site.
that next week. Yeah, they don't have a site. And then on Wednesdays, we have the show Totem and myself do. Heroes Never Die airs Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific. And then host streams when available run on a flex schedule, so be sure to follow us on Twitch to know when we're going live. And like they said, we do have a Patreon at patreon.com/OWL Network. You can contact me personally on Twitter at Edinar Overwatch or on Twitch at twitch.tv/Edinar. Ramses, where can they find you at?
They can find me on Twitter at Ramses_OW. They can find my other show at PushPointPOD. And yeah,
Also feed in Open Division.
it's true.
Mm-hmm.
You can watch that on Labasco's Twitch channel every Saturday at noon Pacific time.
Yeah, and as for myself, I'm on Twitter at TumblydrunkCTR, and I stream Monday, Wednesday, Thursday on Twitch at twitch.tv/TumblydRunk, where you could see me benching podcast co-host at the main tank position, primarily. Good times.
You're
but
not wrong.
No
it is
prisoners,
true. But of course, we are here with Foul. So, Foul, why don't you go ahead and let them know not only how they can get a hold of the platform for Fantasy OWL over on social media, but also how they can contact you otherwise.
Yep. So on Twitter, you can reach us at Fantasy Owl Live. The website is just pretty easy, fantasyowl.com, Fantasy OWL, and on there is direct links to our Discord. Jump in, message me. I'm Foul on Discord. Happy to talk at any time, ideas, whatever it may be. I love hearing from everybody. So, yeah.
All right, well, thank you again so much for taking some time out to sit down and talk with us about all of the new things coming to the platform. I know it's kind of like the hectic period. Everyone's gearing up for, the Overwatch League to return. We got some big stuff on the horizon, not just for the league, not just for the podcast, but also for just a base game. And of course, we got all these platforms going. So hopefully everyone out there is going to be checking out all of the new ways to play the game. So with that being said, guys, thank you again so much for joining us tonight on OWL by the numbers. And we hope to see you guys back tomorrow night when Ed and I do our Pacific preview for one of the divisions. So we will see you guys then. Take care and have a good night.
Peace.
Later.